Well, let's say good evening also to Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of the NITI Aayog. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Mr. Kumar, I want to start off with, what has been one of the biggest focus areas for us even here at Mirror Now, which is the healthcare segment. And today, even for the government, it's one of those segments that's, like the government says, seen the record ever allocation of 2.24 lakh crore rupees. Could you give us a sense of where we hope to spend this money, how we hope to utilize this entire budget?
Is that a question to me, Tanvi?
Yes, Mr. Rajiv Kumar.
Would you be good enough to repeat it, please, because I couldn't hear your voice to begin with?
Mr. Kumar, the first question to you is about the healthcare allocation, and it's an unprecedented number that has been given to us, 2.25 lakh crore. If you could explain to us what the breakup will be.
Because the breakup, the allocation represents 137% increase over the previous year. This is, as you say, unprecedented and a response to the pandemic. And as the finance minister said in his speech, rather briefly, that this will be used to strengthen the national health system by launching a new scheme, which will make it more accessible to all the people, which will include digital technology, which will encourage telemedicine. It will strengthen, it will open the 17,000 strengthen and open the 17,000 health and wellness centers in the rural areas and 11,000 health and wellness centers in the urban areas. It's also going to have open 17 new entry point checking facilities that will ensure that we have enough checks to not import any such infection in the future. And 32 of these entry points that are already there will be strengthened. Moreover, it will be spent on improving the nutrition. The government will launch a nutrition 2.0 that will merge supplementary feeding programs with the National Nutrition Mission that is in place, and that will be further strengthened to improve our nutrition performance and get to those targets. So those are the different various details about its health allocation. But the essential point is that this will be used to strengthen the public health infrastructure so that we are not found wanting if ever, unfortunately, we get an onslaught of a similar pandemic in the future.
So since this announcement has been made, we've had many of your rivals come out and question. The Congress party said, well, if you effectively see 35,000 crore rupees is for the vaccine project, 49,000 crore rupees is the Finance Commission grants, then about 60,000 crore rupees is the drinking water and sanitation plan. All of this is what is pushing the number up, but effectively it's not a 135% increase in healthcare budget. Now, what would your response be to that?
I don't agree with this at all. This is nitpicking of the highest order. In fact, the 137% increase does not include the higher allocation for the Jal Jeevan mission and also for the Swacch Bharat Urban mission that will make sure that all our large cities have a fecal disposal program, etc., because those two will also contribute directly to improving our health prospects. And also the announcements for improving the air quality, which has got 2,270 crore for cities above 1 million population, as well as the scrapping policy for vehicles that will both help to reduce pollution. I think that again should be added to the health outlay. And therefore, there is no reason for us to try and, as it were, raise spuriously the health allocation, because it's all there, and then the budget numbers are there for everybody to see, and this will make sure that there is a 137% increase in health outlay this year over the previous one.
Okay, let me come to the other aspect, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, which is the divestment plan. Very essential to the government's plans of raising additional funds in a year where you are stepping up your spending, also you're borrowing, but you need some more money. Now, can you give us some insights into what kind of state-owned companies will you be looking at when you draw up that list for stake sale and divestment?
You know, before I answer that question, Tanvi, I think you should appreciate the fact that for the first time
Yeah.
there is a there is a pipeline which has been given for all the sectors from which asset monetization will take place, and a real-time dashboard is being set up for closely monitoring this asset monetization and this investment program, so that the implementation is ensured. And therefore, I think the target of 1.75 lakh crore, which is, I think, conservative, will be achieved and maybe even overachieved. Now, and also she mentioned in her speech already some of the very large companies that are, that are there for this investment. And I know that a lot of work has already been done, and these are really at the threshold of completing this investment process. Going forward, the criteria for the drawing of the list will remain the same, which is to unlock maximum value from our public sector enterprises and other assets, and to identify those companies and those assets which are where capital is being underutilized in a big way. Now, beyond that, to mention any companies, I think it'll be difficult because we've just received the request in NITI Aayog for drawing up the list. We will be identifying them in the next few weeks and communicating those to the Department of Public Asset Management for taking them forward.
If I may just follow that up with the question on the land monetization, what percentage of this target do you think we will be able to achieve via this tool?
Again, I'm afraid cannot give you an exact figure, because that will depend very much on the lands identified, on their location, on their values, whether it's going to be for leasing or sale. So, at the moment, it's far too early for us to give you precise numbers on how much would land monetization. But the fact that there is now a budget proposal for land monetization of surplus land, I think is in itself a very big step forward.
I agree with you, and I do appreciate the fact that the government is looking at different methods now to bring in the money, to raise the money, from the traditional ones that we've seen in the past few budgets. Let me take it a step further, and Mr. Rajiv Kumar, this is a question about the smaller businesses, the MSMEs and SMEs. While yes, in the last 1 year, there have been several schemes that were announced to help these companies and businesses survive the pandemic and the lockdown. The experts say not too much has now been announced in this budget in terms of now revival and perhaps flourishing of these businesses. Has that been a conscious choice?
I think this is wrong. This is a wrong perception. The budget allocation for MSMEs has been more than doubled this year to more than 18,000 crore. That itself would mean that these MSMEs will have, as the finance minister said, now greater access to modern technology, to digital platforms, to even machine learning and artificial intelligence, and that's what we're hoping for. I mean, the small and medium enterprises, that their definition has been changed. Their top line revenues can now go up to 250 crores. The amendments in the company affairs list that the finance minister announced of the audit requirements of now being raised from 5 to 10 crore for revenues, I think would reduce the regulatory burden significantly. The ability for single person companies to change their form and format and do their business in whichever way possible is a very good step forward. Plus also the fact that now the tax audit has been the limit has been raised to 10 crore in case 95% of your business is done digitally. So all of these are impetus to the small and medium enterprises. So it's, I think, very wrong to say that this sector has not received the attention that it was due. Let me also say one other thing. The ability of the banks to lend to the small and medium enterprises would depend very much on their being able to clean up their balance sheets, and that would become possible. And that would become possible by the setting up of these two asset management and asset reconstruction companies, which can take the non-performing assets of the banks and let them get on with the business of expanding their credit to the MSMEs. So I think the government is very conscious of the very important role that the MSMEs play in employment generation and in export performance, and therefore we will do whatever is required to improve their access to credit, technology, and market information as we go forward.
In fact, you raised a very pertinent point, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this. The two asset restructuring companies that have been announced, there was a large expectation about a bad bank. Essentially, that's what you're doing in a different format. But how will these companies be different from the arsenal that we already have? Will there be a government guarantee or a backing involved here? How will this function differently to ensure it's a more successful process?
Well, we have learned from the past, that some of these asset management companies have not worked as well as they should have. But while some have, and that's very clear, the whole UTI scheme was managed very well. I don't have the details yet, but my impression is that these companies will be managed by highly trained professionals and will be given the autonomy and the resources for them to be able to perform their functions and role as well as they can.
All right. Mr. Kumar, my last question to you, and this, of course, is about a sector we must talk about, which is the farming sector. At a point where the government's three bold reforms have run into a hurdle and are currently in suspension, what was the idea behind the announcements that were made today, whether it was reference to MSP or even, the steps being taken for creating infrastructure within the APMCs? What's the messaging here?
Well, the messaging is very clear, that this government is hugely cognizant of the importance of the agricultural sector for our country and our economy, and of the farmers' income and the assurance of raising the farmers' income as has been promised. That they are at the core of our economic policy making, and therefore the messaging was to show that we have done so much in the past few years, which has been much more. And the best figure that the finance minister gave was the outlay for procurement of pulses, which has risen from 256 crore to 25,000 crore, from 2013-14 to 2020-21. And then in the fact that the agricultural infrastructure fund will be used to further strengthen the APMCs, there are 1,000 more mandis will be brought into the ENAM. All of this to say that the government is committed, deeply committed, to the modernization of this sector, to improving its value addition, to setting up the food park, and to greatly enhancing the farmers' incomes in times to come. And this was a message to our farmers to say that one should not overlook this government's continued commitment to the welfare of the farmers and to the improvement of the agricultural sector.
Point well taken. I hope that message works as far as the government's efforts to assuage the farmers is also concerned. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, for giving us time and speaking to us here on such an important day.